Today is the 29th Sunday of the Ordinary Times. The liturgy of the word is taken from the Isaiah, the prophet, letter to the Hebrews, and the Gospel of Mark. My reflection will be based on the Gospel of Mark, chapter 10, verses 35 to 45. It begins saying that James and John, two disciples of Christ, who were his cousins, comes to Jesus and says, "We want you to grant us a favor." And Jesus asked, "What is it?" And they said, "We want to sit at your right and at your left in your kingdom." Now, of course, Mark the Evangelist records that the 10 other disciples who heard about this were very indignant at the two brothers. Now, we will go back to chapter 9 of Gospel of Mark to get the background for this particular situation. In chapter 9, Jesus and the disciples walked to Capernaum. At Capernaum, Jesus asked a question from the disciples, "What were you discussing on the way?" And Mark the Evangelist says, they didn't say anything. And he mentioned because they were discussing who among them was the greatest. Obviously, Jesus knew that, and he calls the 12 disciples together and said, "If anyone wants to be great, let him become the servant of all." So that is the lesson that Jesus gives to them at that time. Now, chapter 10, he predicts his impending death and resurrection. And James and John take advantage of that situation and ask the Lord for the favor to sit at his right and at his left. Again, the same idea. Who is the greatest among them? They wanted to be the greatest. And of course, the other 10 disciples were indignant because probably that some of them wanted to be the greatest or to sit at the right and the left of Jesus in the kingdom. They probably were angry at the two disciples because they were the first to ask this particular favor from the Lord. And again, this would have been the situation in which the community of the disciples would have been divided, 2 against 10 and 10 against 2. So Jesus calls them together again and he says, "Look, the leaders and the rulers of the world, they want power. They want to lord it over others. But this must not happen to you." Chapter 9, with regard to who was the greatest, Jesus doesn't even condemn them, saying, "You shouldn't have been thinking like that." But he says, yes, if you want to be the greatest, yes, be great by serving others. So now in today's gospel also, Jesus for the second time teaches the same lesson for the disciples to understand what he means by a servant. One who wants to be the greatest needs to be the servant of all. Apparently, the first lesson was not learned. And in all probability, the second lesson also was not learned till Jesus himself had died and rose again. Then they would understand everything. Things would fall into place very clearly. So, my dear brothers and sisters, we are invited to reflect on this particular gospel passage, which invites, Mark the Evangelist invites all of us to realize that we have this natural tendency. We want to be ambitious. We want to be the first. We want to have power in whatever situation that we might be. And Mark says that Jesus doesn't condemn that. But he says, if you want to be the first, if you want to be a leader, if you want to have position, then you need to be the servant of all. So this is the lesson that today the gospel invites us to learn. So, and then Jesus had said, the Son of Man who had come not to be served, but to serve. And this is the invitation that is given to us. Yes, you want to be a leader? Very good. But leader is the servant of all. And as Son of Man did, emulate me, says Jesus. Be a person who will not be served, but will be able to serve others. Thank you. May God bless you.